videotape is part of the Video Oral History Project of the Colony Public Library of the City of the Colony, Texas. This interview is with Mr. Dave Fox of 3737 Potomac, Highland Park, Texas. Dave Fox is the former chairman of Fox & Jacobs and is currently in private investments. This interview is taking place at 3737 Potomac, Highland Park, Texas, on Saturday, May 11, 1985, at approximately 9:15 a.m. My name is Katherine Jagoe. I am an interviewer for the Colony Public Library Video Oral History Project. Mr. Fox, would you please state your name and tell us something about your background, such as where and when you were born, where you grew up, and other places that you lived?
I'm Dave Fox. I was born in Casper, Wyoming. And my parents then moved to Chicago, where I was raised. They moved down to Dallas in 1937. Fortunately for me, they brought me along. Didn't leave me in Chicago. The company that I'm with, or was with, Fox & Jacobs, was formed in 1947 with my dad, Ike Jacobs, Joe Jacobs, Ike's brother, and myself. Actually, it was Ike and my father who formed it, and we were passing it. A year and a half later, my father died. And I was in school at the time. Ike and I made a deal, and we then became managing partners of the company. And we've been building houses in Dallas and Texas since then.
And built a lot of them.
Built a lot of them.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about your educational background and any specialized training that you've had.
Well, before the war, I went to A&M for a year and a half, and I was gone for 3 years. I came back and went to SAU for a year and a half. Did not finish college. I was selling piece goods on the road when my father died. So I had no training for the business. Ike Jacobs had graduated from A&M and was an engineer. He incidentally died in 1964. 20 years.
Now tell us about your family. We know you're married. What is her name and any children?
Mary and I have 5 children, 2 boys and 2 girls. The oldest is a girl, and the youngest is a girl. They're all in their 20s.
What are the names?
Well, starting from the oldest, Laura, David, Michael, Katie, Kevin, and Amy.
Very good. Okay. Now, it would be wonderful if we could use this whole interview time just to talk with you about the history of Fox & Jacobs, and I hope if someone has not done that interview that they will be doing it with you sometime soon, because that's very important. But today we want to focus on your work with the Colony, Texas, and the development of that area. Can you tell us why you made the decision to develop the Colony in the first place?
Well, our company had been building in North Dallas since the mid-50s, early 50s. And basically, our track had been going out Marsh Lane, starting well at Walnut Hill, and on up to Royal and Forest, and LBJ, and up to Carrollton Farm Ranch. And in the early, about 1970 or 71, we undertook a very major project in Carrollton, and which was a part of our expansion to the north. At that time, the sewer and water problems were coming in that there was limited capacity, especially the sewer capacity in Carrollton. And there wasn't going to be an immediate solution to it. We went up to Louisville and built some homes. And we were then trying to find out where we could go until the sewer capacity was increased in Carrollton. Very coincidentally, as a matter of fact, a realtor came to us and came to Ron Walden and said he had a piece of land that he'd like for us to look at that he didn't think was ready for development, one we ought to take a look at. He drove Ron up to 121 and 423. Ron then came back, and what it was, we all use the USGA maps that show drainage and show ownerships. And most of the people were using a set of maps that were either going out Preston Road or going out I-35. Nobody had really worked the territory between those two, and there was another set of maps this realtor had started using. And so there really had not been much activity between Preston Road and I-35. And there was a lot of land in there that was good land to build on. It was relatively, had some roll to it. It was pretty land, ex-cotton patch land. And there was a tract of, I don't know what it was, 300 or 400 acres that was available. We took a look at it in terms of its general location, and it was a good location. It was in the path of development. 121, of course, went straight across the airport. It was actually quicker to get to the airport at that time on 121 than it would be from down at the Beltline area. Beltline, the airport was just coming into its own. But 300 or 400 acres really wasn't enough to do anything with in terms of trying to create a new environment out that far. So we suggested to him that perhaps if he could, through a trustee arrangement, could lock up a significant tract of land that we might have some interest in it. Over a period of 6 or 8 months, he was able to block up some land, upwards of 2,000 acres, I guess. Maybe it wasn't quite that much, but it was done as a trustee. It was not known who was the purchaser.
What was his name?
He worked for Hank Dickerson, and the name escapes me right now. But he did an excellent job. And it was our concept that if we could get enough land together, we could then afford to the lead time that was necessary and the front end money that was necessary to get some basic utilities in there.
Mm-hmm.
And we felt like it was going to take somewhere in the 1,500 to 2,000 acres. We could form a municipal utility district, which is referred to as MUD.
Mm-hmm.
That's done in many parts of the country, in many parts of Texas. It allows the owners of the land to create this district and agree to tax the land to put in the necessary water and sewer. And that's essentially what happened. We felt that it was in the right basic location. It was not contiguous with development. We realized that problem. But we felt that there wasn't availabilities in Carrollton, limited capabilities in Louisville, and prices of land over on Preston Roadside were very, very high.
Well, you mentioned that there was a problem with the sewers in Carrollton as being a reason to not continue development at that time in Carrollton, and yet you're moving into an area where there's nothing whatsoever. Did you see this as a greater problem, or apparently you did not? Can you comment on that a little bit?
Well, we would be waiting for somebody else to do something in the other towns. And it was going to take, they had plans to do it over a period of years, but there wasn't anything imminent.
So this way you could do it.
We could do it ourselves and ensure that we could get it done in a speedy time.
Who were the other individuals involved with you in developing that MUD municipal utility district? And how did you get them to be involved?
Well, we then had to get together a team, legal advisors, bond people, land planners, and engineers. And go through this exercise. We had never done this. We got a hold of a bond person who had done a lot of bond work and had done a lot of utility district work. We got a hold of two engineering groups, one of a subdivision engineer group and the other a more utility engineer group. And got our lawyer and worked up this team and set up a schedule that felt like it was going to take, I don't remember what it was, 12 or 18 months to get it done. And we got it done and got it done on schedule.
At the time that you were doing this, there was a recession in the national economy that a lot of people were saying people would not be able to afford homes, or at least the average individual would no longer be able to afford homes. Did this national event, economic downturn, have any impact on your decision to build in this area? Were you looking at that as part of the picture?
Well, actually, we were very fortunate. We got my memory tells me we opened our models in August of '74. The recession in the home building business came along in early '75.
Okay, so
We got a little bit of momentum going that carried us through the spring of '75 when business was very, very bad. But we had the business that we put on the books that we basically pre-sell. We had that backlog of business going in the first of '75. That carried us through that.
So that none of that was a reason for finding this more rural area. There had been some speculation that might have been part of the influence.
No, we actually put the plan together in 1973.
Okay. Very good. When did you begin to really see the colony as an independent planned community that might eventually become independent on its own and incorporate and so forth? Did you set out to build a new town? Or?
Well, I'm sure you know that we had some other kinds of problems having to do with who had jurisdiction on the land, whether the city of Frisco had jurisdiction on the land, whether Hebron had jurisdiction. In Texas, you have the home rule basis where cities can have some jurisdiction in terms of first call on land that surrounds them. There was quite a long period of time there we had to do negotiations with Frisco as to whether they would release this land or not, or whether they would let us develop in their, what they claimed was their jurisdiction. And after much negotiations, and it seemed appropriate to us, and it finally became appropriate to them, that it wasn't appropriate for us to be a part of the city of Frisco. They had their own agendas. We were way off to the 3 miles away from the 4 miles away from any development of theirs. For them to put in utilities as a city, they didn't have the bonding capacity to do it. They frankly didn't want to give up the jurisdiction. I understood that, but nevertheless, there really was no way to do it except to be an independent sort of a thing and be out of their jurisdiction. And we finally negotiated a settlement with them that they did release the land, which has subsequently become the colony. Well, that left the colony then sitting there as a large, what would become a large subdivision. The county then had some jurisdiction, but minimal jurisdiction in Texas, minimal controls. So we saw that eventually the colony would have to become someplace. It would have to be a part of some community, or a community of its own. We felt that as it grew and it got to be 300 families, 400 families, 500 families, those families would make the best decision. We tried to keep their options open so that they could make the decision if we didn't want to make the decision. Decisions of attaching themselves to Louisville, or to Hebron, or to Frisco, or even to Little Inn, all were available to them, as well as incorporate themselves. And they, as you know, went through great conversations themselves. And they would ask us questions of what their alternatives were. But we felt that the best thing that could happen was for them to go through that whole exercise, let it be their decision. Prior to that point, the first thing they did, they started to form a homeowners association. They had to have some cohesive body to get some organization about it. They formed a volunteer fire department. All of this before the incorporation of the town. Became obvious to everyone that there needed to be some kind of a structure in place too. One of the things that was a problem was what do you do about the stray dogs that were showing up? People would just drop them off on the side of the road. The county had no control. There was nothing that the city could do. They had no tax base. The city, there wasn't a city. And they just became more and more involved in it, and more it became aware to them that the best thing they could do was that we had the MUD organization, the utility district organization, which took care of very adequately the water, sewer, and drainage. Other functions that would come to the community needed to be put in place.
So essentially, you saw the buyers making those decisions. Fox and Jacobs really did not plan to make those decisions from the beginning.
No, we always felt it would be their city and their community, and they should do what they wanted to do in their best interest.
When you were making your original plans, did you study any other communities, any new town concepts that had been built up around the United States?
Well, of course, at those times, back in the 60s, the federal government was getting very, very active in various things, including housing. There was the Newtown legislation that passed. It must have been in the mid-60s, I suppose, and there were some new towns formed that were under federal government jurisdiction and financed. Relatively attractive financing, but with that became a lot of government controls, federal controls by the bureaucracy, just by the nature of the beast. And obviously there was one formed in the mid-60s over in just on the other side of Closeville. The slowness of that process, in spite of the advantageous financing of that, the amount of the decision-making process was just incredible. It just didn't seem to us that those things would fly. We felt if we could do the utility district thing, which was the basic issue, the reason we went there, because if we could do that, government finances really would not be an aid to us, it would be a hindrance to us. So we elected not to go that way.
Well, that was my next question. You just continued right on into it, and that was specifically when other developers were using the federal funding, you decided to go it on your own. You mentioned some of the reasons. Were there any others?
No, it was just that just sometimes those special fundings are very, very costly. They seem cheap at the front end, but the final analysis, they're tremendous cost. So the main thing really was the question of being able to get the basic underground utilities. If we could do that, accomplish the other. I'm sure you've heard conversation. There's still conversation about the telephone issue, which utility company had jurisdiction.
Okay. What were some of the major difficulties that you encountered in the basic development, in the beginning development?
Well, the first basic difficulty was the question of this whole question of jurisdiction, whether we could form a MUD. If you're in a city's jurisdiction, or the city limits of the city, you had to get permission from that city. And Frisco took a very strong position that we could not form it without their permission. And they didn't want us to form it; they wanted to. So that was a very, very difficult period in there through.
How did you overcome that obstacle?
Well, we finally had to convince them that they really didn't have it, and if we wanted to go to court over it, they may have lost other claims that they had out there. That process is still an ongoing process too, incidentally. But that was a very difficult piece of business. The telephone situation was a very awkward and difficult piece of business. Still is not totally resolved. As you know, there's litigation still in place on that. One of these days, the service, hopefully, for the benefit of the county. The whole question of marketing, would people move out there?
Mhm.
We really never had any problems in our minds. It was a proper location. The prices would be good because the prices that could be served by sewer line, the land prices have escalated so dramatically that we could come in there with $25,000, $50,000 price range, and it was in the path of that growth. It was convenient to the airport, relatively convenient to I-35. That was not our uppermost concern. Our uppermost concern was just people get it on the street. And then the instant thing about how that would all come together and what city services, normal city services would be missed first, how you resolve them. But then we built a spec fire station before the volunteer fire department was formed. They weren't sure whether they were going to form one or not. We just thought that they probably would, so we built the station, and they did form their team.
Well, that worked out well, and I think it was a very effective fire department.
It was a very fun period of time. The people were very active, very interested in their community. They took a tremendous interest in the growth of it. They had a lot of pride in it. Still do. It was really fun to watch those people come together, work on these problems that normal folks would not have that opportunity.
What were some of the high points in this early time for you?
Oh, I don't know, those 4th of July celebrations early on, the opening of the fire station, the formation of the homeowners association, the community meetings that we had up there in the evenings. Seeing those people, which were, it sounds like a cliche, but they were pioneering. They were pioneering in not just that they were in a new district, they were a new area to live in. They were pioneering in a process of how do you bring people together and try to form a government and become a self-governing body. And, to see that take place was a fascinating experience.
It was. What were some of the particular issues that you remember that impressed you, that made an imprint on you?
Well, again, the whole question of what was important to them. I mean, there are some people that didn't want to incorporate it. They just liked the way it was. But as needs became aware, and obviously the whole issue of security became an issue, the police issue, and the question of, as I say, the stray dogs, which was kind of a peripheral thing, but that brought a lot of people together and said, hey, we've got to form something that we can control this. The question of the street was one thing to have the streets there, but occasionally you got to get them swept, and we're supposed to take care of it. Well, much of the construction activity was caused the dirty streets, so we took care of those streets for a long period of time. But as the blocks became mature and it was no longer our part of the deal, they had to figure out some way that they could form some kind of an organization. And they didn't have to form the city at that time. They could have waited, or they could have gone with the other cities. They could have Frisco would love to have. But as they grew, then they became almost a threat to the other cities because they became bigger than Frisco. But I think just the interpersonal sort of things that were going on between us, those people, and us, and between them, and obviously there was, some people had more interest in the development than others did, and others had dramatic interest in it and had disagreements. They had to work out their disagreements. And again, that process was an incredible process.
Do you feel that the final decision to incorporate rather than to join with another one of the cities, do you feel that was the right decision for them to have made?
Oh, I got to tell you now, we had our fingers crossed all along that that's what they'd do. We just felt that would be in their best interest. Their issues that they were going to be facing and their problems that they were going to deal with unique to them, and it would be very hard for the other cities to be able to service them appropriately.
Well, if I Jackson Jacobs really was the governing body for quite a long time. You've mentioned some of the things that went on. Is there anything else that comes to mind that was a problem as being the only government structure other than the MUD that existed?
Well, there was always a conversation of did they really want us to control it or didn't they want us to control it? And if we were going to control it, if we were going to supply the money to do everything, we wanted to say how it's going to be done. And that isn't right. It should be that the people have to control it. But then if they do that, then they got to tax themselves and spend their money. So that transition period is just like a child growing up, going through their teenage years. That transition was, in some days, was very awkward. But it was all done in good faith. The leadership at that time in the community were so interested in what they were doing, and they took a lot of flack from a lot of their neighbors. And they may have made mistakes, second guessing. I don't know that they made any, but could second guess and say I wish they did something different than they did. That process and the fact that they took a leadership and they took the responsibility to move forward, and yes, they had to negotiate with us on a lot of issues. When we'd stop sweeping, what were they going to do about? They had no money. But what were we going to do about parks, setting park sites aside, and what kind of money we would donate to the parks? Question of the fire department: how much support would we give them for hobble? Where would we set the property aside for a library? That negotiation, that whole question of the developer-city relationship was a constant sort of a thing, and that's still there, and it's very healthy. And the fact that those people were able to come together and elect leadership, and the fact that there was enough interest, and there was a high turnout in elections. Those early elections had a very high turnout. And it showed that those folks just loved what they were doing, loved the community.
When they did finally incorporate, how did you feel? Was it a sense of relief that now you didn't carry that particular burden anymore, or was there a little bit of sadness in a way? Or what was your feeling when
We felt
suddenly they were independent?
Yeah, well, they had formed a city and they had their charter and they had played, but they had no money. I mean, it was still just another step in the process, and it was again a great process. It was something that we had looked forward to, and that day would come that they would form. But even then, they still were, we still were partners as we are today. And, so it was a graduation, from junior high school to high school. They still weren't out of school yet, and the support was still needed, and our cooperation is still needed. No, we thought it was a great day. We were very enthused about it. Right. But they weren't going to be totally independent because they still had no funds. Mm-hmm. But at least they have a structure in place that they can start to look forward to the future.
You have talked a little bit about the concept of the colony as a frontier community. Are there any other characteristics of what one would consider a frontier pioneer community of the late 19th century that could be put in compared with the late 20th century as far as this particular community is concerned?
Well, I don't know how people sort themselves out. Why did people buy there when they could have bought in Garland? I always said that the cream rose to the top and the cream came to the colony, and those were people that had self-confidence, which would relate to the early pioneers, that they had confidence in themselves and had confidence in what they were doing. So they really, in my opinion, they were great people that were able to get themselves together and get their families together, move to the colony when there wasn't anything there.
Really take that risk.
And those people that have self-confidence are people that do rise, and they're great people. It's a self-screening process.
How did you choose the name of the colony?
Well, I'm sure if you need to have a good feel of that history, and I'm sorry I kind of forgot some of the particulars of it. Of course, it comes from the Peters colony, which was how this part of Texas was all colonized. England. Encouraged people to move from England to the United States by giving them tracts of land. And there was entrepreneurs, one of them, Peter, I guess, that was able to make a deal with the state and then go over and get people to come over and settle this land. Vacant land that nobody's doing anything on has no value. The only way the state can create value is to get people to come over and do something on that land and create value. They had to encourage them and entice them to give them the land. They had these, I forgot how far south the Peter County came, but it came quite a way south. There was even some territorial battles at that time. One so-called war up there, Hedgecock War. Actually, I understand it was just a big party with a couple dozen soldiers on each side, but we got drunk together.
So the value of the land continues by occupying it and continuing to produce. So that's where you really drew on that name, the colony. You were honored by the residents of the colony as their founder, given a special presentation. How did you feel on that day? All those people came together and saluted you.
Well, I felt, what the right word is, humble's not the right word. They really saluted themselves. Obviously, I was pleased. It was a great personal experience for us, as well as corporate success. It was really a personal sort of a thing, and the people that had been involved in the colony and the organization. Just, I thought really was kind of recognition of the fact that we had jointly pulled this off. They considered us on the team. I thought it was kind of neat. Go up there and my right to vote one of these days as an honorary citizen.
You had it to do over again. Would you do anything differently?
Oh, I don't know that I really would. Maybe some of the little nuances to it, but we just were very, very fortunate. The timing worked out exactly perfect from our perspective. We had to go through the whole exercise of drilling a well and recognizing the well had a lot of minerals in it, and how long would those wells last, and when would we be able to go with another kind of a water system, build our own water system, or negotiate with the city of Dallas, bring the city of Dallas water in. And that whole, it was a great experience, and I don't know that we made any wrong decisions. Maybe the most awkward, one of the most awkward things, it still is the question of telephone service. Because we didn't accomplish in that. If there was one thing we didn't accomplish at this point, it was the telephone issue. It's still an issue.
Well, we've covered a lot of territory. Is there any other topic or individual or event that you feel was particularly significant that you'd like to be sure and get on the record and discuss with us today?
No, if I started naming people, whether or not leave out too many. With those early leaders that are still leaders in the community. So many of them took a tremendous personal risk to take positions. Yeah, sometimes kind of lonely for them. But I'm sure that they're going to have great stories to tell their grandchildren. First Commission, Charter Commission. I don't know if there's been a new city formed in Texas since then. There hadn't been for years prior to that. To have a new city is a unique piece of business. It just doesn't happen every day.
No, it doesn't. It is a rather special event of
Very
significance. Anything else you want to be sure to mention?
No, I wish them well.
Well, we thank you very, very much for participating in our project. You're one of the most significant people for this project, and I'm glad you could take the time to be with us today to do this.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Got it?